Hello class, welcome to Algebra Concepts Lesson 5-2, Day 1. We are going to learn how to write and graph equations in point, slope, and standard forms today. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to write and graph those equations in both point, slope, and standard forms. So let's start with point, slope, and we talked about this a little bit last year, but let's just kind of remind ourselves what point, slope form is. Point, slope form is where you have one point, so you have an x and then a y, and then you also have the slope. Okay, so point slope form. And the way that point slope form works is you always do y minus whatever your y value is in your point equals the slope, and then you, in parentheses, put x minus the x value in our given point. Okay, so make sure you have this written down somewhere that you can easily access. So let's practice graphing in point slope form first. The first thing I like to do is identify what is my slope. It's whatever number is right outside of those parentheses. So in this case, my slope is going to be negative 2/3. And then I need to figure out what is my point. So remember, we always do x then y. And our formula was x minus x1. So if you look at this, I have x plus 1. That means that I need to change that 1 to a negative 1. Because in order to get x plus 1, it'd be x minus a negative 1. Okay, so you just always do the opposite sign of what you see. So here it's a positive 1. That means in the point it'd be a negative 1. And then if I look at the y, I have y minus 3. So it's a negative 3 there. So it would be a positive 3 here. And then I start by plotting my point. So I go left 1 and up 3. And then I use my slope. So from my point, I'm going to go down 2, right 3. Down 2, right 3. And I can continue that pattern. Otherwise, I could move that negative to be with the 3, and I could say up 2, left 3. Up 2, left 3. Okay, and then I'm going to try to draw a nice line. And then the last step, make sure you put your arrows on the ends of those lines, okay? So now, I want you to look at this question, this equation, and figure out how to graph it. Go ahead and give that a shot on your own. Good luck. Okay, for this problem, hopefully you said your slope was 1/2 and your point was 3, negative 2. So you first started by plotting that point at 3, negative 2. And then you used your slope. You either went up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, or you went down 1, left 2. And that's how you get your graph. If you have questions about that, please be sure to raise your hand, ask for some help. I'm happy to help you. Let's move on to example 2. Writing an equation in point slope form. Okay, so we have write an equation in point slope form for a line with a slope of 7/4 that passes through the point 3, negative 2. So my formula, y minus y1 equals my slope times x minus x1. And that is something you want to memorize or make sure you write down on your note card. Okay, so then I have y minus a negative 2. So y minus negative becomes plus equals my slope, so 7/4 times x minus 3. And that's it. I'm done writing my equation in point slope form. So why don't you go ahead and take this information and write an equation in point slope form. Good luck. Hopefully you said y minus negative becomes plus y plus 3 equals 5/7. And then parentheses x minus a negative 6 becomes x plus 6. And then you close those parentheses. If you have questions about this, please be sure to reach out for some help. I am happy to help you. Let's move on to our next example. So now, what if I give you 2 points instead of the point and the slope? Well, it just means that you have one more step. So your first step is going to be to find the slope. So remember, that's your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so if I do that, I could do 3 minus a negative 1, minus a negative becomes plus, and then negative 3 minus 2. 3 plus 1 is 4 over negative 5. So then I would just write that with the negative out in front of that fraction. Okay, so that's my first step. My second step is going to be plug it into the formula. So you can have two possible answers here, because I can either use this first point, so I could use my slope of negative 4/5 and the point 2, negative 1. My equation would be y minus a negative 1 becomes y plus 1 equals negative 4/5 parentheses x minus 2. Or I could use my other point. So my slope stays the same, but then my other point would give me a different equation. I would say y minus 3 equals negative 4/5 parentheses x minus a negative becomes plus 3. So either of those answers there are correct. Okay, so you can do either of these as your solution. So why don't you go ahead and practice writing an equation in point slope on your own. Good luck. All right, hopefully for this problem you ended up with either y minus 4 equals 1/2 times x minus 5, or you said y minus 1 equals 1/2 times x plus 1. If you have any questions about point slope, any of these first three examples, please be sure to ask for some help. And now let's move on to talking about standard form. Okay, so standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now, the rules for standard form is that a, b, and c are integers. That means no decimal and no fraction. Okay, no decimal and no fractions. A and b can't both equal 0. So meaning you have to at least have an x or a y, okay? And then a is positive. All right, now let's look at how do we graph from standard form. So this is going to feel kind of similar to what we did last chapter with the intercepts. So you actually graph in standard form using the intercepts. So if I'm solving for the x-intercept, remember that's when y equals 0. So I'd say 3x minus 2 times 0 equals 9. Anything times 0 is just 0, so I would have 3x minus 0. I don't need to write minus 0, so I'm going to just leave it at 3x equals 9. And then divide both sides by 3, and I get x equals 3. So my ordered pair here would be 3, 0. Then if I take and solve for my y-intercept, remember that's when x equals 0. So then you'd say 3 times 0 minus 2y equals 9. Anything times 0 is still 0. So 0 minus 2y would just be minus 2y equals 9. Divide both sides by that negative 2, and you get negative 4.5. So my ordered pair for the y-intercept would be 0, comma, negative 4.5. Okay, so now if I graph that 0, negative 4.5, that would be right in there. And then if I plot my 3, 0, that would be right there. And then all I have to do is connect those 2 points. So I'm going to do my best to draw a straight line. And that would be my solution. Okay, so you solve for the intercepts, you plot the intercepts, and then you connect it to form the line. Now I want you to try graphing this one in standard form on your own. Good luck. All right, for this problem, hopefully you ended up with a graph that looks like this. You ended up with an x-intercept of 2.50, comma 0, and a y-intercept of 0, 2. Okay, if you have questions about that, please be sure to reach out for some help. I'm happy to help you. Now let's practice writing in standard form. So with standard form, when you are given 2 points, and we're trying to write it, remember, in ax plus by equals c. Okay, so the way that you find c, actually, let me back up. So a is going to equal whatever your y value is. So in this case, if I look at my 2 points, the only y value, the only non-zero y value, I should say, so non-zero would be 2. So in this case, a equals 2. B is whatever your non-zero x value is. In this case, a -6. And then C equals A times B. So in this case, 2 times -6 or -12. So then the way that you write it is you'd say, instead of A, you would write 2x plus, instead of B, I would write -6. So I'm actually going to say 2x minus 6y equals -12. And that is your final answer, okay? So as long as you remember that A is your non-zero y value, B is your non-zero x value, and then C is A times B, you are good to go. Then once you have this, you want to check to make sure that there aren't any fractions or decimals. In this case, there aren't. You want to check to make sure A is positive. It is. And you want to make sure that that it's not just 0 over here, which it's not, so we're good to go. Now I want you to solve this, set up this equation on your own. Good luck. All right, for this problem, hopefully you said A equals 9, B equals 5, and then C equals 45. So then your equation was 9x plus 5y equals 45. If you have questions about that, please be sure to ask for some help. Let's move on to example 6. So now we're going to do that same process again. We have A equals my y value, which would be a -3. B equals my x value, which is 8. And C equals -3 times 8 is -24. So if I were to write this equation, it'd be -3x plus 8y equals -24. And I'm close to being done, except for the fact that my a value is negative. So I need to make sure that I end with a positive a value. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having a -3x, I'm going to make this a positive 3x. And then I'm going to change the sign of everything. So instead of being a positive 8, it's now -8. Instead of being a -24, now it's positive 24. So if you change the signs of everything on both sides of the equal sign, you can do that. You can just flip them so that way they are different, and that way they are the opposite of what they were, is maybe a better way to say that. And now we follow the rules where A is a positive value, okay? Now, this is the last example. Write an equation in standard form that passes through the points. So notice that I don't have any zeros this time. And if I look at these, I see that my x values are the same. Whenever your x values match, this is one of those special cases where you're just going to say x equals whatever that number is. And then down here, notice that my y values are the same. So then I would say y equals whatever that y value is. And that's still considered your standard form of the equation. The reason that's still considered standard form is because this would just be 1x plus 0y, and this would be 0x plus 1y. But we never have to write 0x, and we don't have to write that 1. So that's why, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it's in standard form, it's still considered standard form. Okay, so if you have any questions about this problem or anything else, please be sure to reach out for some help. I'm happy to help you. Have a great day.